Welcome back to the Market Frontlines. Back in studio here in Vancouver, I'm Lyndsay Malchuk. Right now, the global race for critical metals is colliding with geopolitics in real time. This morning's security briefing confirmed escalating military activity between the U.S., Israel, and Iran, with missile strikes expanding across the region and growing concerns around energy routes and military supply chains. But something else came out of those briefings that investors are only starting to connect. Just days before the most recent strikes, the Pentagon issued an urgent request to industry asking for increased supply of 13 critical minerals used in weapons systems, metals like tungsten, graphite, nickel, and vanadium. At the same time, defense officials are now meeting with major contractors because recent operations are already drawing down weapons inventories faster than production lines can actually replace. That raises a bigger question. If the world is entering a period of prolonged geopolitical conflict, are we actually prepared from a material standpoint to support it? And that is exactly where the sharpest analysts in the resource sector are focusing their attention. Hallgarten Company has built a reputation for identifying strategic metal trends long before they become mainstream. Investment narratives offering some of the most direct and sometimes contrarian analysts in the mining sector. And joining me now is someone who has spent decades dissecting the global metals landscape and challenging the market to look deeper at the structural realities behind supply and demand. I'm sitting down with Christopher Ecclestone, strategist and principal at Hallgarten Company. Christopher, it's so great to have you here with us. Wow, there's a lot going on.
Great to be here. Yeah, we live in interesting times.
Absolutely. Let's start with
No Chinese curse.
Yeah, absolutely.
Supposedly Chinese curse.
It doesn't end. Let's start with what came out of the briefing this week. Just days before the latest military strike in the Middle East, the Pentagon did issue an urgent request to that mining company. Now, the question, Christopher, the Pentagon does not usually move this quickly unless there is real vulnerabilities. So, is the U.S. actually short on critical defense metals right now, and how serious is that supply gap?
Totally. It's been probably shorter than for a good 20 years now. But it didn't care. And now that it cares, it wants companies to ramp up, but mining companies just cannot ramp up like that. Particularly because it's come at a period where, the alarm bells only started to ring 18 months ago, 2 years ago, particularly when China banned dual use, that is metals that have a military use and a commercial use. When they started banning the export of those, the alarm bells rang. But that then, revalued many companies in the Western markets that were players in those metals, whether they be tungsten, tin, antimony, etc., etc. But those companies can't respond that fast. And what's more, they can only respond as fast as the governments will permit their projects. And if the governments are dragging their feet on permitting the projects, there is absolutely nothing that the mining companies can do to meet the frustrated demand.
Absolutely.
Of the military.
Absolutely. If we push that further and continue that connection with the weapons production, you put it very well. They can't ramp up that quickly. There are all of these things that are shifting them to do what they can, but they can only do what they can with what they have. And when you're flipping over and say, we need it now, and but then on the flip side, they're saying, but. I mean,
yeah.
Let's focus past that. Where does tungsten sit in that supply chain?
Oh, tungsten sits right at the top. Tungsten is used both offensively and defensively. It is used for armor plating on many sort of vehicles, whether they're tanks or personnel carriers, ships, planes. But it's also used offensively in missiles and projectiles of all sorts. Because of its armor-piercing ability. But its armor-piercing ability meets armored vehicles, then it's rather neutralized. But, we have asymmetrical warfare these days. And so the goal is to have a weapon that will flatten an office block or a underground site. And to do that, you need to have tungsten-tipped weapons. Everybody had stockpiles of these things, but the thing is that it's not this war that's depleted them, it's the Ukrainian war.
Really?
4 years of the Ukrainian war have depleted seriously the stockpiles of the US, Europe, Russia, and that has meant that there is no spare product lying around. And it's coming at a phase after the price of tungsten was pathetic for the last good 10 years. And that meant that there not only was then a little production from the West, but there was no capital available for financing these projects. And even now, one looks at what Washington has doled out to some of the mid-tier tungsten players over the last year, and you see them getting 5 million here, 2 million there, 10 million there. I mean, that doesn't move the dial when your project is 300 million. The rest has to come from the capital markets, and the capital markets have been rightly wary that that the governments, the Pentagons and elsewheres of the world are actually going to stay constant in their interest. They think that wars last 2 days, and be all over by Christmas. The classic line, which didn't work in the First World War, the Second World War, the Ukrainian War, and this war that's now in its 6th day was supposed to last 2 days.
2 days, 2 or 3 days, yeah.
And it didn't. So that is the problem. But the capital markets say, look, if governments are only fair weather friends for 2 days, we're not going to put up $290 million to match their $10 million. Sorry, that equation doesn't work. The governments are going to have to look more serious about their funding of these critical metals. Yeah, it's very easy to put them on a list. It's a lot harder to actually extract the money from Congress and Parliament and whatever to actually fund the real stuff, the mining.
It's wild times for sure. We hear in a lot of the briefings that Donald Trump is saying we are ready and we are supplied for as long as this is going to take to get the message out there. And at the same time, they're calling for these urgent matters. So if we are entering a period of sustained geopolitical conflict and defense spending continues rising globally, Christopher, could tungsten demand from the defense sector accelerate much faster than investors currently understand?
Well, what you need actually is you can buy tungsten potentially if there was enough actually available from the mines, and then put in a stockpile. But the other group, and it's not just the miners who are falling down here; it's actually the defense contractors. They plod along. They produce. There's some sort of number I heard yesterday. I think that the producer of these THAAD defense mechanisms, these projectile launchers, missile launchers, can only produce 12 a year. 12 a year in war production. In the Second World War, countries were producing hundreds, if not thousands, of planes, and they can produce 12 a year. And even the pace of construction of missiles and drones in Iran is way more rapid and effective than in the US.
Really?
These companies are wary of gearing up for a 2-day war or a 2-week war or a 2-month war. Because if wars end, then suddenly the government says, it was a big panic. We're not that interested in that much stuff anymore. And that leaves the defense contractors out to dry and the miners. Governments have to be more consistent in their policies of accumulating and building weaponry and defensive metal stockpiles.
Well, the thing is you hit some points there on what tungsten is really great for. And another layer to that conversation is where that supply actually comes from. Right now, I think China still dominates about 90%, but there is one company that has really come forward and said, nah, not anymore. So we have Almonty Industries, who has a mine already in production in Penasqueira, Portugal. They've ramped up. They're starting production already, and they're saying, Dong, why don't you tell me a little bit more of how critical that is in this time that we're in, that there is a company now who is coming on the market and able to supply outside of China.
Yeah, well, Almonty walked through the valley of death over the last 12 years. When no one was interested, they persisted. And the only reason that we have Almonty now coming online in both South Korea and very shortly reactivating their activities in Spain is because they are in the right metal at the right time in the right place. And that's only come about because of them and the determination of the management and the determination of the shareholders as well, because government was giving zero interest, zero support. But now Monty's, it's like sitting pretty, as you can see from the surge in the market cap. Um, it is it's a real doer in an industry that is full of talkers and not doers. And so it's very interesting how they position themselves. If you've gone back 5 years and you'd said, "Oh, this is going to happen now," these events of last weekend, even they wouldn't have predicted it. But that what they were predicting was that the Western supply would be inadequate, and lo and behold,
Here we are.
totally inadequate.
Here we are. And that's the thing is that, it's Lewis Black, you're right. He's done a really great job in building the team out and taking things slow so it's done properly. And to have that Sangdong in South Korea mine now come into production is a huge, massive move for them, aligned
Absolutely. Yeah.
at exactly the
Yep.
time that it should be. And I'm wondering if that is going to make them more of a more so an asset, an important asset in the global tungsten market? And would it be just the US or would it be all of these regions?
Oh, absolutely. If there's any sort of wake up call that's coming from this, is that you cannot rely upon the US. All these Gulf states are on the verge of running out of missiles. And so they could turn around and say, okay, well, let's buy some missiles from Europe. Sorry, no missiles available. Europe has also, dropped its game totally and utterly. And Europe thought that, it would run on the power of prayer. And the power of prayer is not going to deliver you tungsten. I'm afraid it doesn't come in a box
Nope.
with a ribbon on it.
It's not on
You've got to
Amazon.
get out there and fight for it. And now, interestingly, you're going to be seeing the military contractors in the West and in the non-West fighting for supplies of various things, whether it's tungsten, antimony, tin, or other things like beryllium, vanadium, which you mentioned before. No one gave a damn about vanadium
What
until
is it?
recently. Now the US government's saying we need vanadium. What? When was the last time the US government mentioned vanadium?
That's right, Christopher. What is it even used for?
Vanadium is used as an alloy with steel to make the steel harder.
Well,
Makes a
wouldn't
lot. Just a small percentage of vanadium in an alloy makes the steel a lot harder. And if you don't have tungsten, for instance, in a context like a ship, I mean, you're not going to build a ship out of tungsten, the ship would sink because tungsten's a very heavy
it's
metal.
very dense.
So you need to strengthen the steel, and vanadium is the metal that you would use for that.
Yeah. Okay. So, let's unpack a little bit more about Almonty just in general. Then you put out a new report just last week about Almonty Industry pulling further ahead of the tungsten pack. So, why don't you unpack that report for us a little bit more?
Okay, well, their Sangdong mine, after a long period of gestation, is now coming into production, and it should be at nameplate production in the next 1 or 2 months. But over and beyond that, they used to have a mine in Spain called Los Santos, which was shuttered because the pit there was pretty much exhausted. Now they're reactivating the tailings processing there. The only thing that's allowed them and others in the industry to particularly get into the business of tailings reprocessing is that the price of of tungsten, pardon me, has reached levels that make that viable. The level of tungsten for many years, and to put it in context, it was like $300 per metric ton unit for many years, and now it's surpassed 2,000 a ton. So we're talking about a six-fold, seven-fold increase, and who knows this week where tungsten will go. It's a case of to the moon with the price. That makes all sorts of tungsten properties become viable again. But, for the US and for all economies, you need to look to have your tungsten onshore as well. And, for the US, Almonty is supplying out of South Korea, which is a very tight ally of the US.
100%.
So that works out. Korean industry want the tungsten product as well. But, if the asset is not in the right jurisdiction, in a wartime economy, you can find that you cannot access the mineral. And so, also interesting, this is an extra thing. Almonty in late last year, after re-domiciling to the US, actually bought a former producing mine in Montana. And so that will be very interesting to see if they get that going again, because the US really needs to have onshore, in-country supply as well as supply from, bigger mines like Sangdong. The Sangdong is really a bit of an 800-pound gorilla in the tungsten space. And that makes Almonty the 800-pound gorilla in the tungsten space, and that's why it's got the market cap that it has today.
That's right. That's right. So, Sangdong is you're right. It's going to be the mother of the mother for sure. And the one in Montana is on a much smaller scale. My question is, do you feel that if the U.S. was to push through the permitting as fast as they need it to do you think that a company like Almonty would be able to produce basically in-house as quick as they need?
Even with the best will in the world and your permit on the table tomorrow, you cannot produce a mine like pulling a rabbit out of a hat. It does take time to build. And, these governments need to be constant in their commitment to the metals, not just say, oh, well, the threat's gone away. We're losing interest rapidly here. Here, have $500,000 and see what you can do. No. No, the lesson here is that that the West is vulnerable, that the West has let its game slip badly, and that it's relying really upon the fact that Almonty was so interested and so dedicated over a decade into getting into production that there's even anything. Because if they were relying upon the US government to give them support, or any government to give them the support, they would have withered on the vine a long time ago. It's by sheer determination that Almonty has got to where it is now.
So if we look, then we flip over and we're going to look at transporting to get this material, whether it be tungsten or anything. 20% of the shipping comes right from Iran, and they've now blocked the entire Strait of Hormuz. So if 20% is coming from Iran, 80% comes from China. 90% of the world's critical minerals are all being shipped through that strait too. How do you think that is going to affect the stocks right now? And do you think it's sustainable right now?
These various governments have entered into war without thinking about these things because they thought that the war was only going to last a matter of days. And, that is, historical delusion that goes back hundreds of years, thinking that things will be over in a very short period of time. So you have no imperative to be supplied because you think that things are going to be, sort of like hunky-dory really soon. But no, if anything, this is going to show you need to look after your trade routes. You need to have access to shipping, and you need to have access basically to the mines. You need to own the mines. Now have them in the hands of enemy powers, and it's only in recent years, and I'm talking in 2 or 3 years, that countries like the US, Canada, and Australia have started to think, who really owns this? And if they do a takeover of our onshore tungsten mine, then it's going to be owned by the Chinese or the Russians or whoever. There's a big wake-up call. The mines need to be not only onshore or in friendly countries, they need to be owned by friendly people, friendly shareholders.
That's right.
Not the potential enemy.
And that's the thing is, back to Almonty we'll use as well, because it is a strong, strong company. That company is not just built on the product, it's built on the management, on the community. I mean, Lewis Black is the largest shareholder, and he makes it very, very clear he wants it to succeed as much as any other shareholder does, and he's going to do it the proper way. We were on site in Panasquera, and the sense of community there, that creates that loyalty, right? So what you're saying is it's not just about the product, it's about building that company that investors can really, truly get behind and believe. Almonty is definitely one of those.
Yes, no, absolutely. It's all about community. You got to be the glue that holds the community together, particularly because we're not talking about big cities here. We're talking about villages and rural communities that are around about. You have to be part of the community, and you have to make it work for everybody.
100%. Well,
not just Washington.
Not just Washington, not just the dollar signs. Well,
absolutely. Yeah.
Christopher, this has been a great conversation. There is so much happening so fast, so I definitely would like to have you back soon, and we'll just continue the conversation as things unfold. But thank you again for joining us. Okay. Again, that was Christopher Ecclestone, strategist and principal at Hallgarten Company. For investors following the tungsten story, you can also take a closer look at Almonty Industries, trading on the TSX under the ticker symbol AII and on the NASDAQ under ALM. You can learn more about the company at almonty.com, and to explore the strategic research and metals analysis coming out of the Hallgarten Company, visit hallgartenco.com. I'm Lyndsay Malchuk with Abaton Media, and this is the Market Frontlines, because when geopolitics shift, the markets that matter tend to move first. Stay tuned. There's more to come.